When Obi heard that his father had died, he did not cry, he did not collapse, he did not sit down heavily the way people do in films when news arrives that changes everything. He simply stood at his office window on the third floor of a building in Onitsha, looked at the traffic below on Okwa Road and said, "Thank you for letting me know." Then he ended the call. His colleague, Ngozi, who had watched his face during the conversation, asked quietly if everything was all right. Obi said yes. He went back to his desk. He finished the report he had been writing. He answered 3 emails. He drove home at the same time he always drove home. He ate the same food he always ate on a Wednesday evening. He slept, or at least he lay down. For 24 years, Obi Okafor had been preparing for this phone call. He had imagined it many times, what he would feel, what he would say, whether he would feel anything at all. He had imagined grief. He had imagined relief. He had imagined anger finally finding its final target and then having nowhere left to go. What he had not imagined was this: nothing. Just the traffic on Okwa Road. Just the report. Just Wednesday evening, the same as any other Wednesday evening. He would understand later, much later, after the funeral, after the old woman at the gate, after the letter, that the nothing he felt that evening was not emptiness. It was a feeling so large it had not yet found its shape.
Obi grew up in a compound in Fegge, Onitsha. Not the wealthy part of Fegge. The part where the roads are narrow and the buildings share walls and everyone knows everyone else's business whether they want to or not. The part where Mama Ifeoma next door could tell you what your family ate for dinner before you finished eating it. His mother, Ngozi, not his colleague Ngozi, a different Ngozi, his mother, sold food from a small stall outside their compound gate. Rice and stew, beans and plantain on Fridays, abacha on Sundays after church because Sunday abacha always sold faster than any other day. She woke before 5 every morning. She was still washing pots after 9 every night. In between those hours, she was feeding other people's families while making sure her son's school fees were never late. His uniform was never visibly torn, and there was always something in the pot when he came home. Obi noticed everything his mother did. He noticed the sandals she wore for 4 years past when they should have been replaced. He noticed the one good dress she saved for Sundays and occasions, worn carefully and hung immediately after to preserve it for the next occasion. He noticed the way she smiled at customers even on the days she had told him privately that business was bad. He decided very young that he was going to make sure she never had to smile through bad days again. That decision became the engine of his entire life. He was a serious student. Not brilliantly gifted, serious. The kind of student who sits in the front row not because the teacher likes him, but because he has decided that every mark matters. His teachers respected him. His classmates found him slightly difficult to read, friendly enough, never unkind, but somehow always at a slight distance, even when he was standing right beside you. At 12, a teacher asked the class to write about someone they admired. Everyone else wrote about footballers or musicians or a famous politician their father supported. Obi wrote about his mother. The teacher read it aloud to the class. Some of the other children laughed because it seemed like a childish choice. Obi sat very still and let them laugh. He had meant every word.
If you grew up watching one parent carry what should have been 2 people's weight, drop a like. You already know what kind of education that is.
For as long as Obi could remember, his father existed as an absence with a shape. He knew the outline, a man named Chukwemeka Okofo, from Oguta originally, who had left Onitsha when Obi was 4 after the marriage collapsed. He knew the man had worked somewhere, Lagos, some people said, Port Harcourt, others said, as if the specific city was the important detail, rather than the fact that wherever he was not here. His mother did not speak about his father, not with anger, not with sadness.
Simply not at all. The subject existed in their house the way a piece of furniture exists that nobody uses and nobody removes. Present, taking up space, acknowledged by its consistent absence from conversation. When Obi was 7, he asked directly, "Mama, where is my father?" She was quiet for a long moment. Then she said, "He went his own way." He went his own way. That sentence contained everything and explained nothing, which is exactly what it was designed to do. And Obi understood this even at 7, which is why he never asked again. He constructed his own version of the story from the fragments available to him. Relatives who dropped careful hints. Neighbors who said things they probably should not have said in front of a child. The particular way adults changed the subject when certain topics came too close to the surface. His version of the story was simple. His father had chosen something else over them. He had found it easier to leave than to stay. He had built a different life somewhere and decided that his son in Fege, Onitsha, was not a priority in that life. It was a clean story. It explained everything neatly. It was also, as it turned out, almost entirely wrong. But Obi would not discover that for another 24 years, in the compound of a man he had never truly known, from a letter found in a dead man's wallet. Obi passed his WAEC with distinctions. He gained admission to study engineering at the University of Nigeria, Nsukka, on his second attempt. The first attempt he missed by 3 marks, which he described to no one as the most useful failure of his life, because it taught him what trying slightly harder than you think you need to actually feels like. On Nsukka, he was the student who studied while others partied, not because he was joyless, because the goal was always larger than the moment. He graduated with a second-class upper. He found work in Onitsha at an engineering consultancy 3 months after graduation. By 30, he was a senior consultant, respected, reliable. The person colleagues brought difficult problems to because he was known for finding solutions that other people had missed. Nobody brought him personal problems, not because he was unkind, because there was something in the way he held himself, a careful, considered distance that communicated, without him ever saying so, that personal problems were not something he was available to receive. He had one friend from university, Kelechi, who called every few months. The calls were warm, genuine, but brief. They had not seen each other in 2 years. He had no relationship. There had been a woman, Adaeze, 3 years earlier. She was kind, direct, the kind of woman who asked the questions that needed asking. After 6 months, she told him quietly that she cared about him, but could not love a wall. He had not argued with this assessment. He had simply accepted it with the same controlled courtesy he accepted everything, and she had left and he had gone back to the report he was writing. His mother had moved into a comfortable flat in GRA that he paid for. She was healthy, she was grateful. She prayed for him every morning. He visited every 3rd Sunday. His life from the outside was a success story. From the inside, it was a very well-constructed room that nobody was allowed to fully enter. Have you ever built something impressive on the outside and known quietly that something was missing on the inside? Write in the comments the struggle. You do not have to explain it. Just let us know.
Obi drove to the funeral, not flew, drove. 6 hours from Onitsha, through Asaba, and across the country roads of Delta State, arriving at a compound he had never visited in a town whose name he barely recognized. His father's people. People who shared his surname and his cheekbones and almost nothing else. The service was held under a canopy in the compound yard. Plastic chairs, a sound system that kept cutting out, a pastor who spoke for slightly longer than the occasion required. Photographs of his father arranged on a table at the front. A man will be recognized from a single old photograph his aunt had once showed him, but older now, thinner, with the specific hollowness around the eyes of someone who has spent years carrying something heavy. People spoke about his father with the warmth reserved for men who are genuinely mourned rather than obligatorily remembered. They described a man who was generous with what little he had, who remembered birthdays, who asked after people's children by name, who sat with sick neighbors, who had a habit of saying, and several people quoted this, "A man's life is measured by what he leaves in people, not what he leaves in banks. Obi sat in the third row and listened to these descriptions of a stranger. Every tribute felt like an insult. Not because they were false, but because they were true, about a man who had apparently been this person for everyone else in the world and had chosen not to be this person for his son. When the service ended and people began embracing, Obi turned to walk away, believing this chapter of his life was finally over. He did not get to leave.
An elderly man approached him as the canopy began to empty. He was perhaps 70, moving carefully with the deliberateness of someone whose knees had been making the same complaint for years. He introduced himself as a family friend. He had known Obi's father since they were young men together in Onitsha in the 1980s, which Obi noted meant this man had known his father longer than Obi's entire life. The man said, "Your father talked about you." Obi said nothing. "He talked about you right to the end. He never stopped." The elderly man reached into the breast pocket of his agbada and produced a wallet. Plain brown leather, worn at the corners. The kind of wallet that has been carried so long it has taken the shape of the pocket it lives in. "They found this on him," the man said. "His phone, his identity card, his money, all of that goes to the family to sort out. But this, he told me years ago, if anything happens to him, make sure his son gets this first before anything else." He held the wallet out. Obi took it. He stood there holding his father's wallet and could not immediately bring himself to open it, which surprised him because he had always believed he felt nothing about this man. Apparently, his hands had a different opinion. Inside, an ATM card, a worn identity card, a photograph. The photograph stopped him. It was him, Obi, recent enough that it must have been taken from someone's social media. The background was recognizable as his office building on Auka Road, visible from a post he had made perhaps 2 years ago. His father had found this photograph somewhere, printed it, and carried it in his wallet. Behind the photograph, folded twice, was an envelope. His name on the front, his father's handwriting, which he had never seen before and recognized instantly as somehow familiar, the way all Igbo handwriting from a certain generation has a particular style. No date. Sealed. Obi looked at it for a long time. He put it in his shirt pocket, thanked the elderly man quietly, and walked to his car. He drove 3 streets away and parked under a mango tree on a quiet road. He opened the envelope.
The letter was 2 pages. His father's handwriting was careful and slightly formal in the way of a man who had learned to write in a different era and never entirely updated his style. It did not begin with an explanation. It did not begin with an apology. It began with this: "Obi, I do not know when you will read this. I do not know if you will read this at all. But I have been carrying this letter for a long time, and I have decided that carrying it is no longer enough." He wrote about leaving Onitsha in 1998, not because he wanted to leave, because the marriage had become a thing that was damaging both of them and would eventually damage the child they both loved if it continued. He had found work in Lagos. He had sent money. He had written letters, many letters, for every birthday, for every Christmas, letters he never received replies to until the address changed and the phone number changed and the letters started coming back marked "Return to Sender." He wrote about a moment in 2006, Obi would have been 12, when he had come to Onitsha and stood outside the school where he believed Obi was enrolled, hoping to see his son walk out through the gate. He stood there for an hour. A security guard eventually asked him to leave. He was not certain which child was Obi. He had not seen him since he was 4. He wrote about finding Obi's face on social media eventually, watching from a distance as his son became a man, feeling simultaneously proud and devastated in equal measure. He wrote, "I want you to know that not a single day passed without me thinking about you. Not one. I do not say this to make you feel guilty. I say it because it is true, and you deserve to know it is true." The final paragraph. "Whatever you have been told, whatever you have concluded, Whatever you have built your understanding of me on, I understand why you believe it. You believed what the evidence in front of you suggested. I would have believed the same thing. All I ask is that you consider the possibility that there was evidence you never saw. The letters are with Mama Ifeoma. She has kept them for me. Everything I could not give you is in those letters. Everything I was trying to give you. The letter ended without his signature, just his name, Chukwuemeka. Not Dad, not your father, just his name offered plainly, as if he understood he had not earned the other titles and was not going to claim them. Obi sat under the mango tree for a long time. The afternoon light moved. Other cars passed on the road. A child somewhere nearby was playing with something that made a rhythmic sound. He folded the letter carefully, put it back in the envelope, put the envelope back in his shirt pocket. He drove back to the compound. He asked for Mama Ifeoma.
Mama Ifeoma was exactly what her name suggested. A woman who had been present at the edges of other people's stories for so long that she had become part of the landscape. She was in her 70s, small, moving carefully, with the specific alertness of someone who has been paying attention to everything around her for decades and has found that paying attention is its own reward. She was not surprised to see him. She led him to a back room in the compound house and pointed to a wooden box on a shelf, the kind of box that was built to last, with a metal latch that had rusted from years of waiting. She said, "He brought it to me in 2009. He said keep it until he comes for it or until Obi comes for it, whichever happens first." She left him alone with it. Inside, the letters, dozens of them, exactly as his father had described. Every birthday, every Christmas, some years 2 or 3. The envelopes arranged in order, the dates visible. Many of them had never been opened. Some were stamped "Returned to Sender" in red ink. Others showed no stamp at all, meaning they had been received, held, and placed here unopened by his mother. His mother had received some of these letters and placed them in here without reading them, without telling Obi, without opening them. This was the detail that sat differently from everything else. Not the letters that came back, the letters that arrived and were put away. He did not open them all that evening. He sat with the box for a long time and then he closed it carefully and drove back to Onitsha.
Tell me in the comments, have you ever found out that something was hidden from you for what someone thought was a good reason? Write the struggle. Just that.
He did not go to his mother immediately. He went home first. He read every letter over 3 evenings. He read them in order, starting from the birthday he turned 5, working forward through the years, watching his father write to a version of him that was growing up in the letters even as his father wrote. The 5-year-old, the 7-year-old, the 10-year-old, the 14-year-old, the 18-year-old. His father had wondered in one letter whether he had passed his WAEC. He had written how proud he would be, regardless of the result, because he had heard from a relative that Obi was working hard. Someone had been reporting back. His father had been listening to whatever fragments of his son's life he could reach, from whatever distance was available to him. On the 4th evening, Obi drove to his mother's flat in GRA. She was in the kitchen when he arrived. She came to the sitting room wiping her hands on the kitchen cloth, and she saw immediately, from his face, from the way he stood, from the box he was carrying, that something had shifted permanently between this evening and the last time she had seen him. He placed the box on the table between them. She looked at it. She sat down. Neither of them spoke for a long time. Then she said, in a voice that carried the exhaustion of decades, "I wondered when this would come. Not, I can explain. Not, it was not what you think. Just, I wondered when this would come." As if she had been carrying the anticipation of this evening the same way his father had been carrying the letter in his wallet. She told him what had happened. After his father left for Lagos, there had been one attempt to communicate.
Not immediately, but 2 years later when the first anger had cooled slightly. A meeting arranged through relatives. His father came to Onitsha. She went to meet him. The conversation lasted less than an hour before it collapsed into the same argument that had ended the marriage, the same wounds reopening, the same accusations and counter-accusations that had no resolution because both of them had been hurt and neither of them had healed yet. After that, every letter felt like the argument continuing by other means. Every birthday card felt like a claim she had not agreed to. She did not open them. She told herself she would decide later what to do with them. Later became months. Months became years. Years became a decade. By the time she understood what she had actually done, undoing it felt impossible, and admitting it felt worse than continuing. She did not say, "I was wrong," but she did not have to. Obi sat looking at her, this woman who repaired his sandals by hand, who smiled at customers on bad days, who woke up before 5 every morning to make sure he never went to school hungry. And he understood something that required sitting in that specific room with that specific woman to understand. She had not hidden the letters because she was cruel. She had hidden them because she was in pain. And pain makes people do things that look like choices but feel from inside like survival. He did not forgive her that evening, but he did not leave either. He asked her to tell him everything she remembered about his father from before things went wrong. She was quiet for a moment. Then she began to speak. And for the first time in 30 years, his father existed in that flat in GRA as something other than an absence.
Months later, Obi visited his father's grave. He brought nothing. No flowers, no gifts. He sat on the ground beside the headstone for a while, the way you sit with someone you are still getting to know, without an agenda, without a prepared speech. Just presence. He thought about the boy who used to wait by the compound gate in Fege for a father who never came. That boy had been waiting for the wrong thing. He had been waiting for a man to arrive. The man had been writing. There is an Igbo saying, "The elder does not get lost on a road that the young man does not know." It means the wisdom to find your way is already in the family. It was passed down. It is already in you. Obi had spent 30 years believing he had built himself entirely alone. He understood now that the engineer's patience, the careful handwriting in reports, the habit of noticing things other people missed, these had come from somewhere. They had come from a man who wrote letters for 24 years to a son who never received them, without stopping, without giving up. Because some people simply do not know how to abandon the people they love, even when abandonment would have been easier. He was his father's son. He had just not known it until a wallet and a box and a mother's exhausted voice in a flat in GRA told him so. Obi stood up. He looked at the headstone one more time. He did not say goodbye. You do not say goodbye to someone you have just met. He said, "I will come back." Then he drove home across the Niger Bridge, the river wide and silver below him, Onitsha visible ahead, the city that had raised him waiting on the other side. There is a proverb his people say, when a man finally understands something he should have known earlier but could only have learnt when he was ready. Onye wetara oji wetara ndu. He who brings kola brings life. His father brought kola for 24 years. It arrived late, but it arrived. If this story is one you needed to hear, subscribe. This is The Struggle NG, and Obi's road was never as empty as he believed it was.